Welcome, everybody. Let's let everybody get in the room first. Hi. Hi, hi, hi. There we are. We almost have everybody in. Hi, hi, Christina. Hi, Candy. Hi, Mary. Cindy and Marilyn and Carol. Hi, Carol. Hi, Pat Bessie. Hi, how you doing? Hi, Ann and Susie. I'm going to scroll through some screens here. Here we go. Yeah. Hi, Sheila. Nice to see you, sweetheart. Hi, Marianne and Susan. Every time if I say a name and it's your name, then I'm saying hi to all the Susans. And oh, there we go. All right, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're here. And Terry, you'll just continue to let people
Yes.
to the weight
Yeah.
room. Just so you all know, this time I decided I'm going to shut the chat off in the beginning so that we're not distracted by it. Things popping up. I just think let's have it be peaceful and a bit Zen-like. There's a little bit I want to say about friendship, some of which was generated by a conversation I had with some of my girlfriends that were here earlier. Every Wednesday, we get together, a group of us get together and just work individually, but in the same room, and then we have lunch together. It's really a wonderful way to stay focused and to kind of catch up. And I talked a little bit with them about friendship as well, and what we're going to talk about today. So there's a few things I want to say about friendship based on that conversation and based especially on some of the emails that I received from all of you. I'm going to invite you to write down any questions you might have based on what you hear. And then we'll open the chat up at some point. I'll let you put some questions in there. I'll take some of the questions in the chat and then also do some one-on-one coaching, um, uh, just sort of laser coaching, but just sometimes just about resources and some things to think about. But we'll do a combination of that and see how it goes. We're just kind of testing this as we go. So friendships, I realized I've written about friendships in the blog here and there, as you all know, if most of you get the blog. And I realized today when I was thinking about friendships and talking about it, that it was really important to me to not oversimplify the whole notion of building friendships, like, oh, just go to the gym 3 times a week or go to yoga 3 times a week and talk to people. It's really more complicated than that. Or just it's richer and more there's a lot more to it in terms of building friendships. By this point, I probably don't have to tell all of you. We all kind of read the data about how important it is to have community in our lives, right? We all sort of know that. We see the data. There's plenty of data. I mean, I was about to like go searching on the internet and I thought, I don't need to do that. We all, as human beings, we know we feel better when we have sufficient time alone, but then when we also have time with like-minded fellow friends, and especially good friends, relationships that have developed over time. And so we get the benefit of that. It's really important. As we age, it's extremely important. I would actually say when I look at my aging parents and friends of mine who are aging, I would say that next to mobility, almost like equal to mobility, is having social contact. We really saw the impact of that during COVID, during shutdown. I saw a dramatic change in her as a result of not being able to be social. Fortunately, she had 7 kids, and so some of us were, going over there to give her social time, but she was able to say out loud, "This is really hard for me." I saw it with my father-in-law, not having access, not being able to get out and be social. I just watched people decline very quickly. So friendships are important. Friendships and mobility are two really key factors to aging well. And they make our wisdom years so much better. And why not combine the two, right? Why not use friendships to help you stay mobile, whether you go to yoga classes together, whether you go walking together, whether you go to the gym together, whatever it might be, hiking, those of us that go in the cold water, swimming together, whatever it might be. It's a great thing to combine both. So I have some notes here I just want to a few things I jotted down in no particular order, but I just want to say something about what stops us from building new friendships. Certainly fear. It's vulnerable to want to say to somebody, to say to anybody, I'm lonely and I would like new friends. As I wrote in my blog, when I came home and I came off the road, I was really embarrassed by like I would sit in my house by myself and think people would think I was crazy if they knew that I really am missing in-person local friendships, to be able to hang out with people and do things spontaneously or do everyday things together. I think in person is important. And I think it's really easy to just, depending on who you are too and your personality style, it can be really scary to be vulnerable. It's a vulnerable thing to reach out to somebody because you potentially face rejection. Um, Maybe you've had you feel like you've been burned by friends in the past, and so there's fear around, oh my gosh, do I really want to put myself in that position again? There's the voice of resistance. Whenever we're stepping outside of our comfort zone, we're always going to come up against the voice of resistance. Remember, you can't change if you don't challenge yourself. There's no growth without stepping outside your comfort zone. There isn't. And when it comes to friendship, you've got to be able to show up someplace maybe where you don't know people and actually open your mouth and talk to people. It's not easy. So there's a lot of resistance that can come up. And resistance, the voice of resistance can sound like, oh, I'm too old. Everybody my age already has their friends. You know, People would think I'm crazy if they knew that I needed friendships. I'm going to appear needy. It'll be too hard to meet new people. I live in a rural area. It's not going to be easy to meet people. Or people can't be trusted. What if you were hurt before? And it's very easy to think, well, I can't really trust people. Or I've certainly, probably many of us have heard women can't trust women. Women don't make good friends. All that, just all this stuff that the mind, which is a computer, and the only information it has access to is past information. So anything we heard that's going to support our fear or resistance, anything that, any past experiences we've had, all of that stuff can come up when it comes time um, to step out and try and meet new people. A lack of relationship skills. Now, this is interesting. My friend Eileen, who passed away last year, was a single woman who lived alone, and she lived alone for quite some time. Her partner had died, I think, 12 or 15 years earlier. And she would come and stay with us, and she began to stay with us more and more frequently. And one of the things we realized was if you are used to living alone, you're not getting the daily experience that somebody who lives with somebody gets about navigating and negotiating relationships. Now, why is this important? Because to me and to my gal pals who were here today, friendships are just building friendships is like dating. It really is meeting new people, getting to know people going through a honeymoon phase, I would say, and then eventually realizing, okay, wait a minute, the honeymoon's over. This person has some weird habits that, I think this is what happens. We're all humans, right? Well, my friend Eileen and I realized that because she lived alone, she was used to doing everything her way. And suddenly she was living with me, with Michael and I, and she had to learn to compromise. Well, she wasn't the compromising type. And so there was friction that would happen. And because we were both fairly psychologically savvy and we really deeply loved each other, we hung in there and learned how to work through those times of friction. Well, if you don't live with somebody or you don't have that experience of um, a disruption in an intimate relationship, the need for repair in some way, and then a reconnection. If you don't have that experience, then you can wind up feeling burned in a relationship, or you can wind up in friendships with people who don't know how to navigate difficult times. They do things like they just walk away and you never hear from them again, right? If you've ever been ghosted, you know how horrible that feeling is. but sometimes that's someone's defense mechanism or regressed position. In other words, they get their buttons pushed, they suddenly regress to being a child, a teenager, and you think you're dealing with an adult, but you're really dealing with a frightened kid that doesn't have the skills to navigate a relationship. I just think these things are important to know because soul connected kinds of relationships take work just like romantic relationships do. They take a commitment of time and energy and nurturing. And so I think that not having the skills, it's very easy to just sort of get your buttons pushed and either point fingers at other people or tell yourself, I'm not good at this friendship thing, so I'm going to just go back to, you know, hanging out with my cat or my dog, which I have cats, and I get how easy it would be to just hang out with them. And I've had dogs, same thing. So lack of relationship skills can stop us. Anti-dependence, my friend Terry Real, who wrote a wonderful book called Us, um, about relationships and in particular romantic relationships, but he talks about how the um, the feminist movement for women or the kind of gaining dependence for women over decades has created a kind of anti-dependence, which I touched on in the last Zoom in terms of being elderly and not being able to receive help. It's created a kind of anti-dependence. And again, in order to be in friendship, to have an intimate, nurturing kind of friendship, you've got to be able to receive help, to ask for help, and to offer help, right? If there needs to be a give and take. So anti-dependence can get in the way of that. And as I said earlier, just needing to step outside of your comfort zone. You are going to have to do that if you want to meet new people. So that's the there's so much to be said just about that alone. And some people that wrote to me, I really felt for them that, they clearly came up against problems in a friendship that either potentially had people just walking away or created conflict. And I could tell just by the emails I was reading that, if there could be some kind of intervention where somebody could help these two friends negotiate differences of opinion, the friendship could be saved and restored. Here's one thing I do know about relationships, and this comes from many, many years of both being in them and coaching people around this topic, is I would almost venture to say that pretty much any relationship can grow and evolve if both parties are willing to come to the table and are open to taking responsibility for their part in whatever challenge you get faced with. Because it's always two doing the tango. It's rarely just one person. And I remember one of the things we were talking about earlier today, when I first started coaching, the first 2 or 3 years of my coaching profession, my coach used to say to me, Cheryl, you will always attract to you clients that are one step ahead of you or one step behind you. And so pay attention to what your clients are dealing with because it's always going to mirror some opportunity of growth with you. I would say the same thing about friendships, that if you find yourself in a relationship with a friend and feeling frustrated with their lack of communication or their abruptness or their inability to stand up for themselves, I don't know, I'm just making that up. It might be a really good opportunity for you to look at, okay, what might I need to look at within myself here? If someone isn't communicating effectively, am I being overly aggressive? Like, do I have enough softness in me to be able to welcome in someone's vulnerability? Can I be with my own vulnerability? That's a big question for a lot of people. Vulnerability is not an easy thing. We don't live in a culture that supports that. So paying attention to in our friendships, you know, who are the people that we're attracting into our lives and what might they have to teach us? Everybody has something to teach us. I think about Harriet Lerner, who wrote The Dance of Anger. Terry, maybe you could put that, grab that link and we'll put it in the chat when we open it up. Harriet Lerner wrote The Dance of Anger, which is a wonderful book, I think, for anybody interested in building good relationships. And she talks about how a relationship between two people will always change if one person changes. It has to change, right? And I think about some of the other uh, books that are not coming to mind right now, but just this whole, I think because Harriet's book was called The Dance of Anger, and I'm thinking about the dance in relationships where if you've been in a romantic relationship for a period of time, you've probably had the experience where you've got one person who's the pursuer and one person who's the retreater, right? So think about yourself in your own relationships where I know in my marriage to Michael, the first half of our marriage, I was the pursuer, he was the retreater. If we had conflict, I wanted to get it resolved immediately because I couldn't sit with the anxiety. So I would literally like go after him. Wait a minute, we need to talk about this. The more I pursued him, the more he backed off. No, 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 I need time. No, 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 what do you mean you need time? And we would do that dance. And it wasn't until a very good friend of mine who was a therapist in her 70s when I was in my, I think, 40s. Michael and I had had a big fight, and I was going out for a walk with her, and I was saying to her, how inappropriate, this is what I was saying, how inappropriate it was that he wouldn't, that he just left the room and refused to speak to me about it. And, that's just not right. You can't do that in relationships. And, she was a very wise, wise woman. And I remember her saying to me, no, what's inappropriate, darling, is that you can't be with your own anxiety. And you can't give them space. Not giving someone the space they need might be inappropriate. And you might want to think about that. And that was the turning point for me where I began to learn how to be in my own discomfort when there was conflict in a relationship rather than trying to get it resolved right away. And I'm very happy to say that today, if Michael and I have some kind of a disagreement, I mean, there's been times actually where I've walked away and he's come to me 2 days later, which is shocking. Um, I mean, shocking in a good way because I was willing to say, wait a minute, maybe something, rather than point the finger, make a judgment about how this other person is behaving in the relationship, stopping and saying, wait a minute, what do I need to do here? What am I being confronted with? And I think we all need to be willing to look at that if we want to build good friendships, because the same thing happens in friendships as it does in romantic relationships. Um, so I said also that building friendships is like dating. We were talking about that earlier today. It's true. The women that I'm friends with, we do things like we make sure we're in touch with each other on a regular basis. We see each other every week, often more than once a week. We go out to dinner together. We go for walks together. As soon as the ice goes away, we'll be doing that again. We're living in like an ice world right now here. We talk about intellectually stimulating things, emotionally interesting things, what's up for us. We share about what's going on in our lives. It is, I will say with this group of women, it is not, it's rarely superficial. And if it is, it's intentional. Like, we're just talking about a TV show we saw or a series we're watching or a book we read or something. I don't mean to minimize it by saying it's superficial, but some of the kind of just simple, interesting things of life. But a lot of times when we're together, we're talking about our thoughts about anything from winter, this season of my life, my marriage, our friendships together. We talk about our friendships and how important they are to us and how we have each other's back. And this has been a conscious effort to work on the friendships over time. And that's part of the dating and then moving beyond dating to really working on the relationship as it goes on. I mentioned earlier, in person is important, regular contact is important, sharing our lives beyond just reporting what's going on. I think that's important. So I'm saying all of this so that you all think about who you are in your friendships. Like, do you take the conversations to a deeper level than just, you know, maybe complaining about the latest thing that's happened with your boss or at work, or even things like, politics or current events and all the insanity that's going on right now. Um, how much time, like paying attention to the quality of our conversations, I think is really important because if you want to deepen friendships over time, it's going to be very important that you pay attention to what you're saying to each other and how you're saying it to each other. My friend Beth earlier made such a really good point. I don't think she's here yet. She was going to try and come on. If you are Beth, raise your hand and it'll show up. Beth was saying that she said to me, Cheryl, you've got really good communication skills. So you've got a leg up on somebody who doesn't have really good communication skills. And so, how do we form relationships with people who maybe are shy or don't have a lot of experience or aren't as, are more introverted, less extroverted? These are all the things we need to think about. I personally think having a variety of friendships is really important. I love the fact that some of my friends are, my husband's an introvert. I learn a lot about introversion by being married to him. I learn a lot about giving myself time to regenerate outside of being with a lot of people and making transitions throughout the day more slowly. So I think diversity in our friendships is a really valuable thing. And then there are times where we will outgrow friendships. If you're committed to personal growth, and I suspect a lot of you are because you're here, there's a chance that you may very well be in relationship with other people who decide, who might, let's say it this way, who might come up against an experience or a time in their life where they're really challenged and they can't go any further at that time than where they're at. I remember one time a therapist friend of mine said something that was so wise. She said, Cheryl, people have walls up for exquisitely good reasons, and it's never your job or anyone's job to try and take them down because the walls need to come down when the person is ready to deal with what's happening beyond that. So, for example, if you're in a friendship with somebody who's, let's say, really having trouble at work and has been consistently complaining about how much they can't stand their job, and it's going on and on and on, and you're tired of hearing about it, you could say, I love you. I get this is really hard for you. I hear you talking about it a lot. And when you're ready to do something about it, I'm here to support you in any way I can. But until then, we might need to limit how often we talk about it. Like that might have to be something that you need to do in order to maintain the friendship. Um, uh, until that person can maybe deal with that. Which brings me to another point. Sometimes when we outgrow friendships, it's not that the friendship needs to end, it's just that the form needs to change. So, for example, it might be that you were really close to somebody and you walked with them 3 days a week, and then things have kind of shifted a bit. Some stuff has happened in their lives, stuff has happened in your lives. And maybe you don't see them 3 times a week anymore, but you see them once a month and you have a really fun, nice time. I don't think it needs to be black and white. I know I've certainly had to learn this, that, I have some close friends of mine that I love dearly, but I love them in a different way than I do the friends that I see on a regular basis that I consider kind of um, like family in a different sort of way. And I don't say that to create any kind of a hierarchy. I don't want to do that. But there are certain kind of levels of quality of our friendships. And there are some people who live far away that I might talk to once a month. And when I talk to them, I am so happy to be talking with them. But that quality or the depth of that friendship will always be different than the people that I see on a regular basis in person. And I think we need all kinds of connections with people. I think there's nothing wrong with, there's no like standard of friendship, right? And if it doesn't meet that standard, then it shouldn't be happening. Um, so yeah, and I also I want to go back to what I said about just if you have friendships where you feel like you're struggling, do yourself a big favor. And rather than focus on them and what they are or are not doing, ask yourself, what might this situation be trying to show me about myself as a friend? My friend Susan, who I see you right there, sweetheart. I see that you're here. Hi, Susan. I'm gonna ask you to unmute for a sec so we can talk about this because I think it was really important what you said. Um,
Okay.
hi. Can
Hi.
you just tell people when we were talking earlier, Susan's part
Yep.
of my work group. What you were saying I thought was really important. I would love for you to just tell people what happened.
Okay, I'll try to be concise. Um, I had a friend, a very, what I considered a very dear friend. And in the beginning of COVID, she announced that she would see me when COVID was over. And she invited me to her house once, right in the pretty much like when we first thought that it was safe to get together. And then I never heard from her again. And I felt absolutely crushed. I thought she's ghosted me. You know what a horrible friend she was. I thought that she was a good friend, and turns out she wasn't a good friend. Um, but then time went on, and I started looking at my own life and doing my own work and recognizing that as the youngest by quite a lot in my family, my oldest sibling is 13 years older than I am. I was always my opinion, what I wanted to do, everything that I would bring up in my family was kind of disregarded, and I was always forced to go along with what everybody else wanted. So what I learned to do is to just go along with people. And I never had ideas of my own. And I was never the person to initiate anything, invite people over, because in my past, that was always rejected. And then I looked at it and I thought, you know what? I never invited Lucy to my house. I never invited her to do anything. I always waited for her to reach out to me. And maybe that's what happened. She probably just got tired, or possibly, I don't know. But she may have just gotten tired of being the one to initiate. And it took me, 4 years to come to that recognition that I did have something to do with that friendship, that the responsibility was mine and I dropped the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you, Susan. And what I loved about that, when Susan told me that story, it helped me to understand a friendship with someone that I considered really, really important to me, who often would never invite me to, like, never initiated getting together. It was always me initiating everything. And eventually, over time, I started to initiate less and less and less. And the minute Susan told me that story, I thought, oh my goodness, this isn't personal. Like, and I can't make her the bad person here. It's really about, um, I mean, because I knew her very, very well. I could totally see what Susan was saying in her and suddenly realized, oh, you know what? This friendship is going to ask me to initiate. And I'm okay with that because I really love this person and I care about her. We may not get together as often as I would like. We don't live close by. But it took away all of that, the stories, really. I was telling myself stories, Susan, like you were saying.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, I was telling myself stories in my head and they weren't true. But I was like having a relationship with this friend in my head based on erroneous information. And I think a lot of us do that in all of our intimate relationships. So thank you so much, Susan. I'm so glad. I just wanted to share that story with all of you. And so I'm going to say there, let me ask you to, Terry, let's open the chat and I'm going to ask you to just put any questions you might have in the chat. We'll kind of go there. And while you're doing that, because I know we're going to need to give you a few minutes to put your questions in there. I want to reiterate something I touched on in the last Zoom about meeting new people. Um, you are going to have to leave your house. Sorry, you are, because in-person relationships really, really require that. You are going to need to put yourself in a situation where you see people on a regular basis. So it could even be that you go to a local coffee shop and you decide that you're going to go twice a week and you're going to work at a local coffee shop. I know I'm thinking of Chicoko in our town where people will often go and they'll sit and they'll work at like community tables together. That may be, I mean, that's like a perfect setup for talking with somebody, right? Taking a painting class, a yoga class, like taking classes. I mentioned in my blog, my friend Beth, and Beth, I don't know if you're here, but Beth and I met during a CrossFit. We both joined CrossFit together, and CrossFit had group classes. We actually had to support one another. They would partner people up at this gym, and and you could pick your own partners, and that's how we got to know each other. And I was going to the gym at least 3 times a week, sometimes more than that. So really you want to think about, now let me say this, if you don't want to do uh any kind of engagement where you're with a group of people but you're doing your own solitary thing, is less likely to kind of strike up a conversation than when you're actually meditation class, let's say that. So you're going to a meditation class. Well, the goal there is to be quiet and be by yourself, right? I would do the meditation class if there was some kind of social activity afterwards, right? Where you could all then, like, if at the end of the meditation, everybody had a chance to stop and share um, what happened to them during their meditation, where there's some kind of engagement. That's how we meet people. So, and, if you live in a place where you're 20 miles away from the nearest opportunity, then you're going to have to drive 20 miles. It's worth it to drive the 20 miles in order to be able to start building these kinds of friendships over time, because they're that important, especially as the years go by. All right, let me look. I see. I'm going to look real quickly. Yes. How can we be supportive witnesses to our friends? It's a good question. Because it brings up the whole notion of listening to people without an agenda, right? I mean, and believe me, this is something I have to work on all the time because I'm a natural helper. But recognizing when people just need to be heard um, and and to just be with their own experience, be with their own feelings. Like those of you who have been to my retreats before, very often if somebody is having a difficult time and they start to cry, the helpers around them want to put their hands on them, or like, it's like, no, 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 leave people alone. Just let them be in their own experience. And I would say the same thing with friends. You could say to a friend, could you tell me how I could be a supportive witness for you? Tell me, I mean, this is the other thing that I think is important. And my girlfriends and I have talked about this. I remember Beth and I had a conversation years ago that was, probably 4 years ago, that was helpful. What are your expectations in a friendship? How about asking the people in your life that question? Tell me, what are your expectations in a friendship? How often would you like to see each other? How often would you like to talk to each other? What do you hope to get from this friendship? What do you hope to give to this friendship? How are you best supported? Like, Susan, Kimmy, I see both of you here. We need to get together and have this conversation with all of us, right? Like, what is it that makes you feel loved and nurtured or supported, or what kind of environment allows you to grow? I mean, these are all the kinds of things that I think we need to be thinking about and doing in as we build our friendships. So thank you for that question, Mary. Um, mm, this is also a good question, Julianne. Challenging to find time for friends when life, work, extended family, children, church, house projects intervene. How to set the priority when you feel responsible. Well, Julianne, the end part of that question is the first thing I'd be looking at. How to set the priority when you feel responsible. That's the first thing you'd want to be dealing with is, what is this role that I've played in my life for most people? This is where the Enneagram can be very helpful. And again, so Terry, if you could put the Enneagram Institute to find out your type. I'll do more about the Enneagram at some point. I won't get into it now, but if you're somebody who's a natural caregiver or helper, uh, then you probably have really developed the skill of taking on responsibilities that don't belong to you or that you could give up, let's say. So I would be looking at what I need to do to challenge the part of me that feels so responsible for everybody else. Number one. Number two, this is why friendships would be very important for you, Julianne, because listen, I think friendships are extremely important to our self-care. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. So that means, at the very least, taking one night a week, one afternoon a week, or finding time to walk with a friend a couple of times during the week. I would say that that needs to be a priority, even if it means getting a babysitter, asking a friend to, asking a family member to help out, like just deciding I'm going to look for one or two places where I'm taking responsibility for things that I don't want to take responsibility for anymore. And I'm going to use that time to nurture friendships, because if you don't nurture them, they absolutely start to fail. And you will need them and want them more and more as your kids grow up and leave the nest. Trust me. How many mothers do we have who are walking around going, what the hell am I going to do with myself when their identity of mom is no longer there? And their kids hopefully are flying the nest because that's what they're supposed to be doing. So I hope that's helpful. Make it a priority, but deal with the responsibility first. What about cultural differences in new friendships? And what about a group you'd like to fit into, but clearly you're not accepted there? Well, I don't know. I think, Kim, that requires more information. I think if it's truly a group where you're not accepted, I don't know why you'd want to be there. That's like the simple, quick answer. Um, and when I think about cultural differences, I think about curiosity. I really love to learn about other cultures, about other points of view, other perspectives. It doesn't mean I'm not closed-minded sometimes. I absolutely am, but I hope my good friends challenge that. And so um, I think let's talk about our cultural differences. Let's celebrate how we're different. Let's look at what we have to learn from each other. Let's look at, you know, um, what my culture has to offer your culture. And in terms of, I mean, if you want to put more in the chat, Kim, about um, the group where you clearly are not accepted. I mean, that's the other thing. We come into our relationships with the majority of our relationship experience coming from our families of origin. And I don't know about you, but I've talked to a lot of people in my lifetime, and I don't find a lot of people with really healthy, functional relationship family systems with a lot of experience in relationship building. And so, it's like, how are you going to expect somebody to play Beethoven when they can't play chopsticks? This is why we need to be able to have open conversations with each other about the skills that we need to learn, that we want to learn. Juliana, yes, I'm an initiator most with all, with one realize I can keep it as is and not resent it. Okay, good. But at times I'm told by her and others that I am intense and it is scary. Well, I think, listen, okay, I would encourage you to take the Enneagram test as well. The Enneagram is just a personality profile test, but it's psychological and spiritual in nature. The reason I say that, Juliana, is I'm going to use this as an example. There's a type on the Enneagram, type 8, which is the personality type whose energy is intense. And they usually have no idea how intense their energy is. They actually think they're like, I don't know what your problem is. I'm fine. But their energy is intense. And sometimes our energy is intense and it's too intense for people. And rather than deal with the anxiety that brings up, people will often walk away from that intense energy. The fact that you have friends that tell you that your energy is intense and it scares them is a good sign. And what I would invite you to do, Juliana, is to go to them and say, I've heard you tell me my energy is intense. Could you say more about that? I want to learn about that intensity so that I can learn to temper it, to at least become aware of it first and then temper it in some way. Because you don't want to be scaring people. And it may just be that you're very direct, and a lot of people aren't very direct, or that you're just, you know, exuberant all the time, and your chances are we often attract to us the opposite of us because the soul's like we're trying to find a balance between the two. If we're aware of that, it can be a wonderful, fun game. If we're not, it can be a nightmare. Okay. Thank you, Edna says, I wish you'd moved to San Diego so we could hang out. I do like San Diego. And thank you. That's very sweet. What skills help you to decide what friendships are nurturing and which are destructive? Sometimes we need to get, I would say, a perspective from other people on that, right? I've certainly used therapists over the years to help me assess the friendships because I wasn't really good at knowing, is this behavior doesn't feel good to me? I mean, here's what I would say about that, Becky. If there's certain behaviors that you're receiving from someone that feel really uncomfortable to you, and you don't feel like you can talk about it, then you might want to get support outside of that friendship to look at whether or not you can't speak about it because it's an unhealthy relationship, or you just have to learn how to find your voice. That would be important. Certainly people being verbally abusive, being highly critical, putting you down, like that's not friendship. That's somebody else's agenda that they're kind of putting on you. Um, how do you feel around the people? What do you think about when you leave your engagement with that person? I know when I leave the close friends of mine that I spend time with, I thank God for them in my life. I often will think, I am so blessed, or my gratitude list at night will often have at least one of their names, if not more, on the list, because if they feel nurturing and loving and supportive, and we're always working on that. If a friendship felt destructive, destructive is a very strong word, and I pay attention to language. So I would then wonder about that. Um, okay, Donna, I see you, and I can't find. I saw Donna. Oh, there you are, Donna. You raised your hand. Did you have your? Yeah, you had your hand raised. There you were. I know. And then you unraised it, I think. But there
I
you.
did. I did.
Yeah.
Just briefly. So I'm at a point in my life where I've taken a good hard look at where I show up with victim thinking in all different kinds of relationships and situations. And as it applies to friendship, a couple things. So I have one particular girlfriend. We've been friends a very long time. And she has a big life. She has a big job. She's a primary caretaker to a mom with dementia. And we don't live too far from one another, but we don't communicate or see one another very often.
Mhm.
But rather than feel resentful toward her, I made a choice to say, you know what, if I need to be the pursuer in this relationship, at least for now, so be it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it with love because I know her heart,
Mhm.
and it's such a shift for me to come to show up that way.
And
And
you could say that to this friend, Donna, right? You could say, listen, I know you've got your hands full right now. You've got your work, you're taking care of parents. And I just want you to know you really matter to me, and I want us to stay connected. And I know we may not be able to see each other as frequently as we used to, but I'm going to make it a point to reach out to you on a regular basis. If you're not available, I'll completely understand, but I'm going to do the work right now for us to keep us connected. This is what I mean about thinking of our friendships like intimate, they are intimate
Mhm,
relationships, right? And I love that you recognize that, yeah, we go through different things in our life. I mean, believe me, this last year with taking care of aging parents, I mean, the closest people to me knew, like sometimes I was MIA for a couple of weeks because it was either sleep or like take care of people, right?
mhm.
Um, and friends would say to me, I know you're up against it. What do you need food? Like, tell me what you need. Like, this is how we nurture friendships. And I'm really glad to hear that that's what you're doing with this one.
And I think what you just said is a good gauge of how to say, is this a healthy friendship or one that I want to continue to nurture? Because if a person, in your situation where you were MIA because you had so much going on, if somebody can't accept that and is demanding of more than you're able to give, well, that might not be the healthiest friendship.
Well,
you
yeah.
know?
And chances are, if they are demanding, that says more about some of the healing work that they may need to do. Like, I have compassion for that because I do get emails from people where I can tell just by reading the email that this person's expectations are driving their interaction with this friendship, and I bet the other person feels the pressure on the other side. And I have such compassion because we come to all of our intimate relationships a bit broken and unskilled. And hopefully we do our own personal work to grow and evolve, right? And we can't do that work alone. And then our relationships is like the place where we are challenged to grow. It's the primary place where we're challenged to grow. We bump up against each other's wounds. And um, so, yes, it might mean that we need to walk away from a friendship temporarily or for good.
Mhm.
But eventually, the more we do our own work, the more we're able to do that from a compassionate
Yeah,
place.
for sure.
So anyway,
Thank
thank you,
you.
John.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Um, yeah, so Jill says, in your local friend group, do you ever get together with each other one-on-one? If so, has it ever been a problem if you get together with some and not everyone? That's a really good question. Yes, Jill, we do get together individually. And even in the beginning, there were some of us who talked about it. Like, if I wanted to just have dinner with one friend for whatever reason, it felt like I was cheating on the others, right? To not include the others. And then we just talked about it. So, I remember saying to one of my friends, listen, I just want you to know, because something had happened where she had found out that we were having dinner or whatever. And I was just like, listen, I just wanted you to know, I wanted to spend time with so and so for this reason. Or we could talk about it together as a group. And I think over time now we've just realized that I love that my girlfriends love each other and that they spend time individually with each other. And at the same time, in the beginning, I too would be like, oh, well, so and so had dinner with so and so without me. But then what did that require? That required me to look at what was going on inside of me. It wasn't about them, it was about me. And it gave me a wonderful opportunity to look at what's going on there, girl? What does this remind you of? This is what I mean about our friendships have so much to teach us in terms of where we all need to grow. Um, so yes, I do want to flag that as something, and I bet, if I were to ask my girlfriends that are here, they would probably say the same thing that, yeah, they've felt that before too. And we've been able to talk about it and we feel a lot more comfortable with that. Let's see. Yeah, when Sandy says, when something's off in a friendship and the other person refuses to say what is wrong and get honest, even when I ask and they say nothing has changed, when it's obvious it has. This is the hard thing, Sandy, because we can't make people do something they don't want to do. And so in that situation, I might say to the friend, if this is true, you know what, Mary, I really care about you and I care about our friendship. And I trust my gut, and something tells me something is off here. If I've hurt you in any way, if I've done something that put you off, I just want you to know I am willing to hear it without saying anything. I'm willing to receive that. Um, and if not, if what you're saying is true, and maybe it has something more to do with what's happening in your life, I'll accept that. But I do really just want to say that something feels different. And then that's pretty much all you can do. And if they continue to say that nothing has changed, you'll just need to accept that and then decide how you want to navigate the friendship from that point on. Maybe nothing has changed, except something might be going on in their life that they're not ready or able to talk about yet? And can you continue getting together and managing your own anxiety around feeling like something's going on that they don't want to talk about? Can you just let them not talk about it and go on with the friendship and see where it leads from there? I think that that's worth considering. Okay, let's see. Let's, Christina, I'm going to go to you. Christina, do you have a question about friendship? Okay, great. I'm going to unmute you or ask you to unmute. There you go. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you for this talk. I think it's really important. So I had some very close friends, and then through my years of infertility, I kind of isolated. And I'm an extrovert, actually. Okay, and I also work remotely. So this is an analogy and a metaphor that has really, I think it's going to be insightful for everybody. So for me, when I finally call someone, I feel like I hit a home run. Like it's like, okay, got this energy and I did it. Yay, yay, yay. And then if they call me right back, I'm like, oh my God. Because friendships are like tennis. It's back and forth and back and forth. And I don't have the energy, it seems, to sustain that. And I don't know what that's about. Like I'm very lonely. I am married. I'm very lonely, but it just takes so much energy for me to engage. I have a best friend who died of cancer. I have another best friend who has a different political view, and we can't really connect anymore. And then I have another friend that comes back and forth, and she's coming back and forth so many times that I just can't engage with her because it's too painful. Right. So yeah, anyway, I'm looking for answers, and I put this in the chat too. Do you have like a sense of how many friends, like is quality or quantity? It's like, I'm just trying to like, I think what's important is maybe I just like block time on my calendar every week to like just call friends and reach out.
Yes. So I was going to say that. So first of all, Christina, I don't answer the question anymore about how many friends
Okay.
should people have. And the reason for that is because I think we're all different. And I get caught in that trap too. It's like the question, how many times are you supposed to have sex if you're in an intimate relationship, right? Everybody always wants to look up and see like, am I doing okay? Like, that's just dumb. Like, how do we know, right? We're all different. And we all have different needs, and we have different needs at different times in our life. So I think some people have one or two very close friends, and that's all they need, and it's quite comfortable, and they feel nurtured and supported. And some people have five or six. So the bigger question that I hear, Christina, is, or the bigger point that you're making, I was going to say is exactly right. I have to be in the right place to talk on the phone. I don't like to talk on the phone for long periods of time. And so I think scheduling time, and I do that with some friends who are not local, where I'll schedule a Zoom because it feels more intimate than a telephone call sometimes, depending on the person. Some people, a phone call is better. But I think you're right. I think because you're saying you're lonely, and you do have some people like, I don't want to play phone tag with anybody. It's a pain in the ass. So what do I want to do then? I want to be able to say, here's when I'm available. Or you could even, I know people who have said, every Friday afternoon from 12 to 3, I'm available for friends. And they've literally told their friends that's when they're available to Zoom or to talk on the phone. And it works. They're able to.
Like friend office hours. Sorry, that's
Yes. Yes. Well, and I know people in business. I remember talking to a guy who did that every Friday. He knew his office was open from 12 to 5. Anybody could come in at any time. And it cut back on a lot of back and forth stuff throughout the week. But yeah, you could look at that and say, okay, a couple of hours, I'm going to set aside whatever works for you schedule wise. And I'm going to make a point to call somebody, or maybe I'm going to text them ahead of time and say, hey, I'm free around 2 o'clock and wanted to catch up. Might you be free then?
So do you think if I become more comfortable with this, it won't feel like it's such a home run scenario? I mean, it's just like really.
Why is that a bad thing that it feels like a home run scenario?
No, well, it's a bad thing when they hit it back and it's like, oh my God, I just hit a home run. I'm tired. It's just like, I don't know. I think I have to start
Okay, so I don't get your home run scenario then. I'm thinking.
Oh, well, no, it's like, I finally did it. Yay. And then they come back and it's like, then I have to go back again. Like, I don't know. It's just this back.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So are you saying, I'm confused.
Okay.
So are you saying I call somebody, I talk to them, we have a nice conversation, and then they call me the next day?
I
And then
guess
we've
so.
got
I think I have forgotten how to be a friend, to be honest. Like, thank you. I just have forgotten like
yeah,
the enjoyment of wanting to have that call, right? I mean, in college, it was on, you're on the phone for hours with people, or anyway, I
those
don't know
days,
if this is
yeah.
relevant to the whole group. So I want to
But
be
you
mindful
know
of.
what? In college, let's remember, and this is important because this is the wisdom years we're talking about. In college, we didn't have texts and email and Zoom. Like, we didn't have so many demands on our time and energy. This is why I think creating like a kind of sacred space where you're going to nurture friendships and then letting your friends know that, like telling the truth about how you feel. I want to stay connected. I don't think I know how to be a good friend. Can we talk about that? Can you help me figure out how to be a good friend? What are your expectations? Like I was saying earlier, what are my expectations? What do I need? Like that's the kind of conversation. I think if you've got one person in your life you could have that conversation with, Christina, that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, I think I need to go to the gym like you did and
Yeah,
meet
okay.
somebody. Yeah, yeah. All
Awesome.
right.
Also, you have an existing friend. Practice with that friend. Just tell
Well,
them.
they're actually not local. Like it's on the phone.
Okay, so but
Yeah,
then
yeah,
on the
that's fine.
phone,
That's fine.
yeah, have that conversation on the phone is what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So we've got a few minutes left. Let me just look at some of the questions. Yeah, so Carol says, I'm committed to personal growth in these wisdom years. Do you have tips on how to discover friends who are also committed to personal growth? Because I feel like they're pretty few and far between. Yeah, what's interesting about that question, Carol, is, and I may have said this before, I don't know, but there was a woman who moved to my local community who went on our local Facebook page and put a post that said, I'm new to the community. I don't know anybody. Walking is important to me. And fitness is important to me. Like I value health and fitness. And I'm wondering if there's anybody who would be interested in walking with me during the week so I could get to know them and the community and also be active. And I think I may have said this, like 40 people put comments almost right away. Now, I could imagine this is where technology could benefit us, where you might go to your local community. Trust me when I tell you, the number of people who are lonely and looking to connect with other people is way bigger than you think. And if you were to be brave enough, step out of your comfort zone to go to like your local community next door or neighborhood or face whatever you have and post something that says, you could do this, Carol. I'm interested in starting a book group on such and such book, and maybe it's a book that you're currently reading, Carol. And I'm wondering if anybody else is interested in personal growth and might be interested in this topic. If so, comment below or message me. That's how I would use technology. Or asking yourself, I mean, it used to be when I used to do retreats at Miraval. I mean, Donna Maloney, who I spoke to, was like one of the early ones there, right, Donna? The number of people who became lifelong friends as a result of going to an in-person event that was related to self-care and personal growth. So looking for workshops, but maybe workshops that meet once a week related to some kind of personal growth in person locally, or starting a book club or starting a weekly conversation. My friend Susan and I, we were just talking today, Susan and Kimmy and Beth were talking about wanting to do a book club on a book that Susan and I have been reading that is like personal growth related. And all of us have said, yes, we want to start doing that. So that's what I would recommend. At the end of the day, the way we build friendships is moving outside of our comfort zone, right? As I was saying, being willing to take action, being willing to put it out there that you're interested. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Nobody responds to your Facebook post. Trust me, you will live through that. I promise you. Your ego might be a little wounded, but the soul could give two craps about that. Really, let's remember who you are. The personality, the ego is is the one that gets wounded. The soul just is the one that says, you know what? I'll do it again at some point. If nobody responds this week, I'll post it again in a couple of weeks, or I'll post something different. You might be surprised at the response that you get. I was surprised at the response I got to this conversation. Yes, indie bookstores are another great place. I think we're moving more towards going back out into the world, looking for local community. I see that happening more and more. And so it'd be good for you to look at where in my local community can I go and hang out. All right. I hope this is helpful. I did press record, so you can go back and listen to this. We'll have it up on the website, probably, I imagine, in a couple of days or so. Also, please feel free to send an email to Cheryl at cherylrichardson.com with other topics that you're interested in. I know there's so many different topics. People have already started writing to me about topics, and we can continue to do these Zooms. They're clearly of interest to you. We have a lot of people that have showed up. I hope that you got something today of value that's going to help you to build, make new friendships, deepen the friendships you already have, really, build the kind of soulful connections. Because I'm telling you, I was thinking, I remember a long time ago, the New York Times did a piece on OSOs, other significant others, OSO. And I remember my friend Beth and I talked about that, and we call each other OSO. We can't expect to get all our needs met from our partners. And as we age, you'd be amazed at the amount of needs you can get met by the good friends in your life, and the amount of needs you get to fulfill by the good people in your life as well. So thank you all for joining me again in the afternoon. I know at some point people keep asking me, could I do one at night? I will do one at night, definitely, for the people who are working. But I'm very grateful to see so many people showing up here today. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon. All right. Thank you. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.